Sweet. So yeah, like I said, thanks for coming on, mate. I thought it'd be a good one for us just to spitball basically about ADHD and your side of business coaching and things like that to run through both sides of those. So yeah, I suppose we could start with if you could just give me sort of a rundown of what your career and business has been like over the past couple of years. I know that you've got FlowFlows, isn't it? That's
Yeah,
the main
yeah.
business. Yeah,
I can go one better than that. I can tell you what it's been like for the last 20 odd years, if you like, but I'll do it very
20 years
quickly.
is good. Try and
So
synopsis that.
I started out working for a sales organisation, big sales organisation. Left it because of the kind of slightly dubious ethics that went on in that organisation. Did a load of temping jobs. One of those I automated. I looked at the job and I was just mind blown by the tediousness of it. So I kind of automated that job in my first week of being there, or semi-automated it. I got ahead, taught myself Excel, and then sort of semi-automated the job and turned it from a 5-day-a-week job into a 20-minute job. Then I sort of fell back into business development, sales type stuff. Grew an agency or helped an agency grow. They were kind of loss making. Did a lot of business development, ran a business development agency, grew a few different agencies that sold. And then COVID hit. At that point, I'd been running a 10-person ish business, which was
All right.
chaotic to say the least. In terms of, I didn't really plan. I just started, and it became quickly that the things that were really obvious to me and in my head weren't obvious to everyone else. The processes that were in my head, no one else knew. So we had to kind
Yeah.
of distill them, put in systems, put in processes, blah, blah, blah. These days, I work with primarily people who are purpose-led in kind of two spheres, really. One is kind of process systems automation. The other one is kind of as a virtual business partner where I handhold people through the journey of, running their business, help them stay accountable, help them stay on track, help them with ideas, help them with systems, just kind of help them avoid all the mistakes that I've made in life as much as possible.
Well, yeah, that's amazing. It's a good summary of the last 20 years.
Quite long, wasn't it? It was quite long. And I didn't
No, it's all
mention
good. It's all
the
good.
not-for-profit stuff that I started, and I didn't mention the charity that I volunteered with and then worked for a bit. But anyway, it was fine.
Oh, amazing. Are you currently got a few different businesses on the go at the same time, or have you got one main focus
No,
at the moment?
FlowFlows is it really. I've tried to bring together the kind of. I started this not-for-profit called the Futureneers, which was focused on helping young people engineer their future, find self-confidence, avoid a lot of the mistakes again that I've made. That seems to be a common theme in my work. And now I'm trying to kind of bring that together with the kind of commercial stuff and make both work together in harmony.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. So you said you started Flow Flows just before COVID, was it?
Well, no,
That's
it started the business started. This business started in 2005, but it
oh
kind
right.
of
So it's been a
has
long one.
developed and changed name and changed offering
Yeah,
kind of over time.
fair enough. Yeah, well, I suppose it's one thing that you're working on side by side with the jobs over the last couple of decades. Is
No. I mean, I've been self-employed pretty much without any other job until September about 2 years ago, and then I started working with a charity that I volunteered as a mentor 3 days a week
right.
for a young person who needed someone to kind of help them back into education. I worked with that young man for a year. It was a real adventure, let's put it that way. I loved pretty much every minute of it, but it was exhausting. Um,
Yeah, I bet.
and and then I had a brief spell at a kind of neurodivergent training organization that reminded me of why I was self-employed.
Yeah. Well, considering you started 2005, that's it's commitment to not having your what you can't work within and what you can work within. I think
Yeah,
you find that out pretty quickly sometimes.
yeah. I mean, it's not that far off like half my life that I've been self-employed for. So,
Yeah, well, you just need that one taste towards the start, don't you? It's going into adult life and work life, and then you realise what systems and where you work best yourself, don't you?
Yeah.
When did you find out when you got your diagnosis for ADHD? Was that quite early on, or was it?
No, no, not at all. I only found out, I think, 2 and a bit years ago.
Oh,
So
right, okay.
I was 40. I know I look much younger. I don't. Yeah, I was 40, and I was having a real difficult time with all these different things that were going on in my life, and I'd kind of self-diagnosed that I was probably bipolar, that I had this, that I had that, that it was like a whole catalogue of different psychological things that I'd worked out that I must have going on. And then I sort of started to work with this school where a lot of the folk had ADHD. I think it was around that time. Maybe it was before that. I don't know anyway. Yeah, I kind of really recognised these stories that people were saying about themselves really resonated. And I was like, right, maybe I really do have ADHD. Because I think everyone thinks of it. They hear ADHD and they think of it as like, oh, naughty kid, the noisy boy in the classroom who can't sit
Yeah,
still.
five bullet points of traits, and then you know which
Yeah,
bit you're in.
yeah, but it's actually like much, much more, as you know, much more kind of, there's much more to it than that. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I got diagnosed a couple of years ago. And honestly, I'd never been in a club. I'd never fitted anywhere. I'd got along with lots of people. I'd always got along pretty much with everyone at school and places like that. And, most people in the workplace, the ones I didn't upset. And yeah, when I found out I was in the ADHD club, it just made a lot of sense. And I found a lot of like-minded, similar weirdos. I mean, people.
Well, that's the other definition of an ADHD, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends
So
who you ask.
weirdos to yeah,
Yeah,
well, normal to us, really, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, there's a
Did you
whole
go?
bunch of
Did you
people
go
that
through the
think,
formal process? Did you have to go through the private process of doing that? Sort of
I was really
was
lucky, actually. I rang my doctor. They were far too busy to talk to me. They kicked me back to the nurse practitioner or the paramedic or somebody. I
right.
explained to them that I wanted a referral for a diagnosis. They asked me to fill out some paperwork, which amazingly I did, and
With the right name and
with the
address.
right name. And I was referred through the Right to Choose
Right.
system
Yeah.
to Psychiatry UK, and I got a diagnosis within 4 months, 3 or 4 months of my initial
Amazing.
request, which I think is unusual.
Yeah, that's very much not going to happen. I don't think. Well, it hasn't happened for a while, hasn't it? Since the huge surge in diagnosis and just the NHS can't really cope with that, can it? So it really is a difficult one.
No, it is, and I wonder whether we're the majority sometimes with the amount of people I speak to who I either identify as ADHD or they identify as ADHD, or they just, I do sometimes wonder whether we're actually the majority rather than the minority.
Yeah, well, I think you're right there, to be honest, because I think saying normal nowadays is like there is no definition anymore. Is there really? There really shouldn't be anyway. But yeah, I think a lot of people take comfort as well, even if they don't have a formal diagnosis or it's not in the family. Take comfort in knowing the information about it and identifying with that. But when you go through the whole process of getting diagnosed, it soon comes to if you haven't got it, you will know by all the questions and all the different processes, like asking family members and friends, and a full. I think my form was like 90 points long for just me, so it's a long process for that. But yeah, I think there's a lot of people within that on the spectrum that identify there, and it's I think it's a very good thing as long as it's not abused. I don't know if you've got any stories of that sort of thing over the last couple of years. Seeing, I haven't really got any of those stories to be honest, but I've always been interested to see how if people actually try and convince themselves and other people they have ADHD when it's clear they haven't. Although it's a rare case, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't. It's really hard to know, isn't it? It's really hard to know. I mean, there's a whole load of people who think it's entirely made up anyway. Clearly, never lived it. So, if they did, they would know. And I think because there are, I think if you know you've got it, you really know, because it's just, it really clicks when you start to read about it.
Yeah,
I guess there will be people who have other neurodivergencies or more complex, people who are autistic and ADHD, who it might be harder to identify that in themselves. Or, I mean, I'm not an
yeah,
expert on this, and I'm really anxious or conscious of not sounding ignorant when I talk about this, but I'm not aware of anyone who's kind of nominated themselves for it. I have had plenty of people say to me, "Oh, well, I think everyone's a little bit ADHD, aren't they?" No, they're not. They're really, really not. Like, my wife is very not ADHD. She's very, very not.
yeah. You can quite quickly find that out when you're living with someone or you're very close to someone. Their routines and unique ways of doing things that we would have that a lot of other people wouldn't, but also superpowers in a way to us. And it seems some things seem easier than others. Taking the bins out could be a very difficult task, but doing 8 hours straight without a break, not a problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
It could be that sort of stuff.
it's almost like you're reading my mind, because yesterday I did work from 8 till 5:30, pretty much without a break. Just got caught up in things. But I did actually just take the bins out as well, and I took my neighbour's bins out because they're on holiday. So double points for me, I think.
There you go. That's double points. You've got to have a point system.
It's things like taking the bins out is kind of less problematic for me than things that have multiple steps. Posting something that I've sold on eBay is just way too complex. You've got to get the address, you've got to find the right packaging, you've got to find some tape, you've got to find a pen to write on the packaging with, you've then got to take it somewhere, you've got to work out where to take it. Now that could be Hermie, Every, whatever they're called these days. Honestly, too many things.
Drain your bank account for a post stamp.
Yeah, well, yeah, there is that as well. But, yeah.
How do you find the differences between? I suppose it's a niche question, but with your experience of ADHD, into just like in general living and being at home and things like that side of things, compared to ADHD within businesses that you might have seen, is there a huge contrast there in terms of the attributes and things from what you've experienced personally and what other people do in the workplace?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So do you mean,
I suppose a good example would be from my previous work, is being in an office, in a big open plan office, and then having such obviously a contrast of personalities. Obviously, that's perfect. That's what everyone wants. But then you've got people that are extremely extroverted, who, from an introvert's point of view with ADHD, seems like that their attributes and stuff wouldn't come class as ADHD. But obviously, it could be hyperactive ADHD if they actually do have it. But those contrasting personalities, I suppose the better question to ask is, how have you found that they work in a team together best within your coaching experience and workplace sort of experience over the years?
My experience of ADHD people or my conscious experience of ADHD people is probably not that great in a work setting or in an employment setting. Most people, I have, and you reference. There's a few things here. You reference coach, and I don't see myself as a coach. I don't see myself as a consultant. I don't see myself as a mentor. I kind of see myself as a sort of slightly muddled version of all three. If I know about something, I definitely won't coach you on it. I'll tell you what I think. If I don't know about something, I'm much more likely to ask kind of coaching questions to help us find an answer to whatever the challenge might be. That's one thing, but that's not what you asked.
Well, yeah, I suppose it's a niche question, isn't it? But if you're not spending time, for a long period of time, day to day, with those sorts of people, it's difficult to gauge, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, I suppose extroverts and introverts is an interesting topic that I haven't really spoken about. It's quite, especially within the ADHD space, maybe like in the workplace as well. It's something that since being diagnosed, I've owned this business with my business partners since I got diagnosed. So I've never really experienced being in that huge setting and stuff like that. But without those analogies and examples, what would you say the main differences are between ADHD, people with ADHD when it comes to extroversion and introversion, if anything, from yours?
It's really interesting. You said a moment ago, I think, if I caught you correctly, that you're an introvert with ADHD. Did you? And
Yeah.
that sort of shook me a little bit because I think I've always assumed, obviously incorrectly, that you can't have ADHD and be an introvert. And I never really thought about it. I'd always assumed that all ADHDers were extrovert because certainly all the ones that I know about. But that's a really silly assumption.
I think,
guess
well,
we
yeah, for
just
me, it's like you'd think extrovert if like all like the podcasts that I've done and all like daily meetings and things like that. But obviously, it takes its toll when cameras are off or I'm not speaking to anyone in terms of being able to, be all right and just prefer myself and my own space. But maybe they don't. Maybe it's not the right thing to put those two things together in terms of those labels of introversion, extroversion, and ADHD, because it's all different, isn't it?
Yeah, or maybe actually, like I find myself going one step back and saying, actually, do extroversion and introversion really exist as people? Because I am extremely extrovert in lots of ways, but I'm massively introverted in other ways. So if I go to a networking event where when I go running, like I join this little running club, lots of middle-aged women, and I just wanted to try and lose a bit of weight, get a bit trimmer, and I thought, if there's people there and I've got some accountability, I'll go and do it. I will just stand on the periphery and not really get that involved because I don't feel it's kind of my place, so I become quite introverted. In other settings, kind of more social setting, I'll be very extrovert. And I guess it's something about safety, like psychological safety or something. When I feel psychologically safe, I'm very extrovert. When I feel out of my depth or in a group where I'm, when I go and play football and there's all these kind of like alpha bloke footballer types, and then there's me, I find myself quite introvert until I start playing, and then I get very vocal. So it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Actually, I think those like introvert or extrovert can't be used to just describe like in its fullest. It is different situations present different sort of reactions and emotions, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, my wife is incredibly introverted compared to me, I would say, in most settings. But if there's some opportunity for kind of, small talk with some old ladies, she'll be right in there. No, it's either this, that, and the other, asking all these like questions that I just haven't got energy for. And I will appear much more the introvert in that setting because I'll just like shrink back into myself because I'm not great at small talk around, the weather.
Depends
or
if you're interested in, isn't it?
Sorry.
Especially with ADHD, it depends what you're interested in as well, isn't it? Especially with ADHD, if you've got a hobby that you're quite passionate about, but maybe it's quite niche, and but if someone gets on the topic, not a problem. We can speak for days about that. But if you're boring, if you talk about something boring, I won't say anything because it's not really worth it to me. You know what I mean? And without being disrespectful to anyone, if we're speaking about it, and it's not, if you speak about bus route something, it's like, it's not for me, I'm afraid. It's not for me.
Yeah, you're saying you said a couple of things now that have really just got like connected things that seem so obvious now. You've said them, but even though I'm a big thinker and I'm always overthinking everything, I hadn't kind of made the connection. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. If it's somewhere where there's no interest, or I feel like I am interested but out of my depth, maybe. I wouldn't get involved in a conversation about football because I don't know anything about it, and I'm going to make myself look pretty stupid pretty quickly. Not that I'm worried about doing that, and actually, no, you're right. I'm not that interested in it. I'm interested in playing it. I'm not interested in talking about it.
Yeah, I think in a social situation, if people are talking about it near you, it's happened since I got my diagnosis and started getting medicated and stuff. So things like the way that I handle things changes. Obviously, it's like my mum noticed that where before I might just be in the conversation and it's going around the table and stuff, I'll just observe. I'll still be there and I'll still be listening, but I'll just be completely silent. And that was weird to them at the start until everything changes to where, it becomes normal again to be able to navigate conversation. It basically forcing the filtering of nonsense out of good conversation wise, but with a bit of a nicer twist on it. Yeah, I think hyper focus and is a huge thing for people with ADHD and where they're comfortable. Because if someone else is passionate about a topic, even if it's in general, much more likely to enjoy that conversation than if it's just completely off the grid for you.
Yeah, definitely. Medication's an interesting one. I know you're the one asking the questions, not me, but medication's an interesting one because I was given 3 different types of medication and didn't get along with any of them. So I'm unmedicated, I think is the technical term.
Oh, so you're not taking anything at the moment now?
No.
How did you? I'm assuming it was it Concerta and Elvance they're the 2 main ones, I think.
Those were the first 2, and then Strattera, I think it was called. Which is
I've not really heard of that one. Really.
It's like a different type. So I think the first 2 are stimulant medications. Just going to Google it subtly in the background whilst we talk. Not very subtle, is it? Because I've clearly got my phone out on a podcast. Not ideal.
It's all good. It's all good. It's more of a conversation than a podcast, but I suppose we're taking podcasting back to its roots, where it's just 2 blokes chatting instead of Diary of a CEO or something.
So yeah, Strattera, just off the top of my head, Strattera is a non-stimulant drug used to treat symptoms of ADHD in adults and children over the age of 6. It's thought to increase some word I can't say levels in the brain. But they all gave me massive anxiety, like crazy levels.
Is that what it was? Yeah.
Yeah.
The symptoms that you get, you really don't know until you've started taking it. It's quite heavy hitting. But yeah, I mean, I found that after the titration period, it embedded seamlessly, really, in terms of. I've always had problems with tiredness at all times of the day. I used to be a very rigid person with coffees and monsters and stuff. This was years ago, but yeah, I used to tank all of those, and then my life had to completely change. I can't drink any caffeine or anything like that when you're taking stimulants, but but I'm not tired throughout the day anymore. As soon as I take my tablets, about 30 minutes, 45 minutes later, my eyes ping open, and then I'm all right. I can get up.
I'm not sure I stopped taking coffee when I took my stimulants, so maybe that was a problem.
Well, you just get more energy, more heart palpitations with coffee and stuff. It depends how much you take as well. If it's not high dosage, then it's not too impactful, but it can override you sometimes.
I mean, it was an incredible feeling of focus. It was almost like someone sort of pressed the pause button on kind of all the like the swirling mists.
Yeah, the noise.
The noise, but it was the on edgeness, and I was just really like on the edge, like really on the edge. Like I felt like a team of hitmen were going to come through the window and like try and shoot me, and I was just ready for anything. It was pretty weird.
Yeah, no, you can't really. It's difficult to sit down and just calmly watch TV and that be it. It's there's 5 more tabs open, but it's not what you want, which is why it's positives and negatives. You just have to counteract it as much as possible. But yeah, it's interesting that you decided to come off the ADHD meds, because as soon as I started, I didn't think I would even think about coming off, just because of, I suppose I just trusted the process at the start and then made my own decision. But yeah, the body tells you if it really isn't for you.
I think the problem was, the irony of ADHD and ADHD meds and lots of other things is around ADHD is, the ADHD meds paperwork is probably the biggest piece of paper that I've ever seen. Like the thing that comes with the drugs. It's like, well, you're giving these people who are clearly not great on reading large swathes of like stuff, like this massive sheet of paper. And the other thing that I found really weird was with Psychiatry UK, all of the communication was through some really weird convoluted system. So the titration process was actually really like clunky and convoluted, and you couldn't really interact with the person who was administering the drugs. You had to log into this weird 1980s style platform, 1990s style platform, whatever, 2000 style platform. And then you had to find a message, and then you had to reply to the message, but it wasn't like email. It was really weird. You had to write a new subject line for every message. And just the process of communication was so clunky that I sort of ran out of time in the titration process because things weren't working. And then I just messaged them and they'd say, we'll stop and we'll reconvene or whatever. But then getting back into a conversation with them and communicating simply with them was so hard.
Yeah, I've found that from I think a lot of people have had that issue, but yeah, having to do a lot of the legwork yourself and paperwork and all that stuff with ADHD and without medication, it's kind of it's opposites of what it should be, really, shouldn't it? Because before I got medication, I had to do, yeah, like you say, all the paperwork you have to do, and then you have to, depending if you go private or not, you have to get all your bloods done and stuff like that. But you have to organise it all yourself, so it's not great for someone without medication for ADHD.
No,
Beforehand.
it's not, and I'm trying to think of an appropriate analogy to share, but it's a bit like asking. This is not an appropriate analogy to share, but it's a bit like asking someone who has a physical disability to run to all these different points. I don't know if that's a really inappropriate analogy, but
No, well, if you find certain thing difficult, aka your analogy running, but ours being concentration and reading everything correctly, first time, then it is a similar thing, isn't it? In terms of this, it's like trying to change your oil sitting in the car. It's
yeah.
It's pretty counterintuitive.
Yeah, and the executive functioning bit, the number of steps and which way around to do them and what to do first, and even the process of, I don't know if you've done anything with access to work, but even that whole process is ridiculously tough. Like, get us 3 quotes and make sure they're in this format and make sure they're with us by this date, and it's a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot. It can be worth it. Like I said, if it really does work, if you click with it, then it works. But how have you found putting mechanisms for yourself in place after not committing to the stimulant medication? Has it been something you've worked on?
The weird thing is, and as people were telling me, when I got diagnosed and I'd kind of talk about all the challenges that I had around stuff, it's like, well, hold up, Jon, you worked for 20 years before that and you obviously did stuff then. So what happened? Why have you suddenly become incapable? But I guess it was just always tough. And I had days of, some days where I'd just be sat staring at my screen and the day would go and I'd have done nothing. And I just thought, I'm just not that interested in what I'm doing, so I'm kind of putting it off. I didn't know that it was ADHD, so I can't even remember your original question. But I guess I'd come up with systems and processes and ways of handling things, and tried as much as possible to delegate or mitigate any of the boring stuff. So I had a really great right hand person who picked up a lot of really tedious stuff for me from probably sort of 2011, 2012 up to COVID. So that made life a lot easier. I had a few temps and kind of admin people, and I try and give as much stuff, or I tried to give as much stuff as I could to other people to do that was tedious. So all of my accounting stuff, they do all my bookkeeping, they do literally everything apart from sending out the invoices, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Delegating the boring stuff that just overwhelms completely is the right thing to do. Is there anything in your personal life that you've put into place? My friend who's my business partner as well. He got diagnosed with ADHD, I think so, over 3 years ago now. So he had a lot of time and experience with medication and putting things into place and coaching and stuff. But then I told him something that I do a couple of weeks ago, which he hasn't done yet. Which he didn't do before, which was simply like midnight the night before. Or I just put cereal in a bowl with a spoon, and I put a cup with a tea bag and the sugar in it, and then I'll just leave it for the morning. Then that simple change in my life was quite impactful to not having to think about the smaller things like that. Because if I don't get the cereal out, I'll forget that it's even there, and then I won't eat until 12. So have you got any of those processes? That's quite a very specific one, but for yourself that you like.
I mean, I'm so greedy that that's not like food is not an issue for me because it's the first thing that I think of in the morning. It's probably the last thing I think of at night, and probably throughout the day, it's mostly the thing I think of. Although I have heard people say that.
Well, stimulants as well. They're appetite suppressor as well. So I think
Oh
that's
yeah.
probably one of the main things. Yeah.
Now this was a thing that I made a mistake. I will come back to your question by the way, but this is a mistake that I made in that I kind of I pre-ate knowing I was going to get stimulants. I pre-ate, so I kind of thought, right, let's just really go for it. Let's not worry about, you can have a suppressed appetite when you go on the stimulants. So I put on like a stone and a half, just kind of like just
In preparation,
eating and drinking like a middle ages king or something, like Henry VIII kind of thing. And then I couldn't then take the stimulants. So now I've got kind of a stone and a half that I just don't need, which is awkward, especially when you get to my age and you can't lose it so easily. Anyway, that wasn't what you asked. You asked about things that I put in place. I have a lot of the same thing. So which is not really a solution. So, I've probably got about 10, 13 mil spanners, which is not really a solution.
Yeah. Well, you'll never lose all of them.
I have at the moment. I don't know where any of them are. No, I do. I know where one
you
of them
is. You put them all in the same place.
I know where one of them is. It's all right. Do I put in place anything? I'm sure I do. I just can't think what those things are.
Sometimes, they're just like unconscious things that it just help you cope in small situations when they arrive.
Yeah, I think I just bask in anarchy really most of the time. Outside of work, at work I'm quite good. I'm quite regimented. I use a lot of tools and systems to kind of organise myself. I think outside of work, it's relatively chaotic. I think it's fair to say.
I think I think we, especially with ADHD, tend to be more, give less attention to our routines and systems outside of work. Rather, like work's always the main thing because it's easy to systemize, isn't it? You can put things in lists, you can put things in place, but with personal life, if you haven't got just a piece of paper with a pen hanging everywhere, you'll forget.
I use a lot of technology, so I use my phone a lot for recording notes. I've always got my phone with me. I wouldn't say I'm glued to it, but so remembering things, I just chuck them into task managers a lot. I kind of use Asana a lot for work. I use Todoist a lot for kind of personal stuff, although mostly I just snooze stuff in it. Things like shopping lists, I put straight into. There's no point telling me to buy 3 things at the shop because I will forget all 3 and buy 3 different things. So I've relied on electronic stuff a lot in my life. Things around clothes, like if I find T-shirts that I like, that are comfortable, that fit nicely, I'll just buy 7 of them. Shorts.
It's the best way.
3. What's that?
It's the best way. Just it gets out of the way for a couple of years if they last.
Yeah, three pairs of shorts that are basically identical. I was going to have a sock cull and get rid of every single pair of socks that I had and just buy, like 40 identical socks, or buy ones that are like distinctly different so I can pair them up more easily. I've got lots that are kind of like similar but different, and that's a lot of time.
Throws you off immediately.
Yeah, I think probably electronic devices and I just don't. I try not to rely on my brain at all because I just don't remember things until I do. I'll just be walking along one day and be like, "Oh, I never put the washing out 4 days ago." So I use alarms a lot.
In the washing machine. I've had that a few times. So,
well, often my wife's done it and she's not happy with me. Like if I forget something, she'll do it and then she gets annoyed with me, and it's not right.
Yeah. Well, that happens, isn't it? I mean, yeah, it's a difficult one with personal lives because especially when you're in business, because it takes up so much time within the 24 hours that there aren't that many hours left to be giving much attention. Sometimes, depending on how many processes you're having for yourself.
What I didn't do is set an alarm for my call that started 3 minutes ago. I was about to be on. That's one thing I didn't set an alarm for.
Well, I won't keep you then if you've got a call to get to.
Is there anything else?
I really enjoyed this. Say again, sorry.
Is there anything else we should have covered off?
Well, I don't know. I think we probably forget. We maybe remember tomorrow, but yeah, I think that's a synopsis of ADHD differences and how we apply them.
There you go, an
Main
absolute
thing
living
is
example. I'm now late for a call. I mean, there's the evidence right there.
there's the evidence. There's the evidence. But with the ADHD charm, we get away with it.
We'll see.
We
We'll
hope.
see.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming on, mate. It's been a pleasure. It's been a different one for me today, considering it's nothing about the profession I'm in or the sector I'm in. So it's good, and I like having the ability to raise awareness with ADHD in any opportunity. So it's a real pleasure. Hopefully we can do it again sometime.
And yeah, definitely. And thanks for having me on. And, I just want to make the point as well, like we've focused a lot on the negatives just because, we have.
We did.
But there's so much great stuff about ADHD as you alluded to there, we're really good at seeing problems differently. We're really good at seeing things in a different way. Some of us are charming. I can be on occasion. But yeah. So I think if any of your folk are employers or whatever that see your podcasts, and I think it's really worth making things work for ADHDers and getting the best from them, because they can bring a really different skill set.
Absolutely, yeah, you're absolutely spot on. And sometimes it can be as simple, depending on if they know or not, as just asking, how can we improve your time here. It can be very, very simple things without realising it.
Completely agree.
Absolutely. Right then, I will let you get on to your call, but I'm sure we'll do part 2 with things that we forgot in this time.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, you can click on the links on the screen now, or subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Thanks again for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.